he was going to have these people in order to win the election, the general election. Is he going to be able to get them or not? Well, I think my suspicion is that a lot of them will come over because they're not going to like the positions that McCain and Palin are taking with respect to Supreme Court policy on Roe v. Wade and with regard to the kinds of judicial nominees they're going to make. So for this block of voters, feminist voters, who knows I don't know how large it is. I don't know if anybody can quantify it, but it could be significant in some states. So it's possible that this time around it will. I think this is an unusual election. I think this is a big election. This is not one of the incremental elections. I think this is a generational shift change in this election. And if it doesn't happen this time, it's going to happen the next time.
Right, transform.
But it's ready to occur. My generation, the baby boomers, it looks like we're only going to get 2 presidents out of our generation: Clinton and Bush. First time tragedy, second time farce.
I was just going to add, as part of the Obama generation, it's our time. But I think that the Supreme Court, the Supreme Court implications of elections may in fact be more of a rallying point for the fundamentalist Christians, which would be, I think, an indication of who in fact has taken that message very much to heart and decided to turn it into them showing up and casting their ballots. And that perhaps on the other side of, in particular, the abortion issue, First Amendment religious freedom issues, and other indicators of sort of social conservatism that the folks on the other side haven't necessarily countered with the same sort of force in terms of turning folks out to the polls. But then that goes to, how people are organized or not organized, who learned lessons from whom at what point, and who's willing to revisit lessons that we were supposed to have learned a long time ago, but apparently abandoned, that kind of grassroots organizing, that kind of politics that the right has usurped and turned on its head and turned back at us in many respects.
So what you're seeming to be saying is that actually it is working for one group. It's working for the right-wing sort of evangelical group.
Yes.
I would think so.
It's motivating them while it doesn't motivate the other side.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it may be that they're in the pews in ways that folks on the other side used to be, but now, by and large, only show up around election time, and may not necessarily be getting the ear of the folks that they need to be talking to because they're having higher level conversations in Washington and New York, and not going to Opelika to have a conversation with somebody about why you need not be concerned about voting for Clinton or the other, because they're actually going to do what you'd like to see done. Don't pay attention to what, the literature that comes from, let's say, the Southern Baptist Convention that's supposed to be distributed to all the folks sitting in the pews. There's been not a lot to sort of repudiate that stuff. And many folks say, well, we're against abortion, so why shouldn't we vote for either? Why should we show up? But for some folks, it's why shouldn't we vote for Bush? Let's say in the past 2 elections.
Young lady in the green.
Hi, yes. My name is Crooms, and I was pretty much going to just make a statement and just simplify pretty much what you said, that I just believe that it's voters and the fact that they're uneducated, the fact that voters really don't understand the process of the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court justices and how that has such an influence on us directly. And if I was to quote Professor Morris, who always said the American public tends to pay attention to who they would much rather have a president in office who they can sit around and have a beer with and talk with than a president who really looks at things like Supreme Court justices. So it was pretty much a simplification of what both of you guys were saying. And I just feel like you said, the right wing, the right side is a little bit more educated. Those evangelicals are more educated and understand that process, the Supreme Court process, and how important it is to have judicial, to have the right Supreme Court justices in office more so than the left side, because I don't think that they're educated. And it's all a matter of knowing the political process and not just what immediately affects you.
All right. Good answer. Yes.
My name is Austin Thompson. I essentially have a question because I'm under the impression that Barack Obama is a centrist. He's not really as progressive as many of the supporters who he's been able to get his support from reading his autobiography, his biography. So my question is really twofold. One is I know that on gun rights and control he's been a bit ambiguous. When it comes to issues about wiretapping, which I'm sure will be across the Supreme Court in the next few years, and also issues of with the torturing, etc. Issues that when he's asked about them, affirmative action is another one where he's asked about it, he kind of dances around it. I'm not confident yet that if Barack Obama is elected, that he's going to put someone on the Supreme Court who will be able to interpret these issues and be progressive. And I see this debate really as you see a far right with John McCain and a centrist in Barack Obama. Am I off with that assessment?
The question is whether, you want to repeat the question? You understand it?
You're basically what you're asking is Obama a centrist or too much of a centrist so that if he wins, he might end up disappointing people on the left? Well, sure, of course. He's also a politician. Now let's break down though what you've said.
All right.
Let's break down what you said. Obama's actually been quite consistent on the gun issue. He said before the recent ruling that he believed that the Constitution conferred an individual right to own guns, but he also believed that cities and states, municipalities had the right to regulate it, sensible regulation. That's actually a position that I think a whole lot of people, if you really think about it, can hold to, and it also happens to be the law of the land. On the wiretap issue, I think we can all agree that's an abominable piece of legislation. However, let's talk about the practical realities of it. That bill was going to pass because it had the support of the Democratic leadership, whatever Obama did. It's important for Obama to take issues off the table that he could be attacked
Yes.
on. It's a practical political decision. I know it disappointed a lot of people, but it was the right decision from a practical point of view because he could not stop it. If he had had a chance of amending the law or changing the law at that point, there might have been some point in him fighting it. But why fight it? He can't stop it. This way, he cannot be attacked because you know what was coming.
Yep.
You know what was coming. On the affirmative action issue, again, I can't give you much joy on that because there are a whole lot of black folks who agree with Obama that affirmative action, as it's actually been practiced, is not appropriate for their kids. I'm one of them. I've got a lot of problems. Before the recent rulings, I went out, I'll never forget going out to the University of California and sitting in their admissions office and seeing how they actually did undergraduate admissions. It really was the way that the critics were describing it. And it was a shock to me. Now, there were practical reasons why they were doing it that way, and we know that we have to find ways to increase the numbers of black students in these places because their numbers have dropped since the Supreme Court rulings and since Ward Connolly's, that I alluded to earlier, Ward Connolly's passage of his bills. But again, these things aren't straight up and down questions. Affirmative action in particular is one in which there can be a great deal of ambivalence and a great deal of, ambivalence is not really the word I want, a great deal of flexibility. We need to rethink affirmative action. My personal view is that affirmative action, the best argument against affirmative action has been practiced is institutions like Howard University, which enable black students to compete straight up and down with anybody, anywhere. And that's really what we need to do. You've got to, again, this is a personal view. You cannot always discount the arguments made by opponents of things that you support. You have to understand what they do. Tough cases, like the cases that led to the current Supreme Court rulings out of Michigan on affirmative action, tough cases make bad decisions. And that was a tough case. That girl She deserved to be, in any rational sense, she deserved to have a good education. She didn't get it. Now, I don't happen to agree with her argument about why she didn't, but she deserved to have been treated better. She
Well,
was.
I'm being told that we have to wrap it up. The time has passed so quickly. And thank you for the good questions that we got from you. And please join me in giving a hand to our panelists.